Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Here we are with NFA Live every Thursday morning, at least here on the East Coast in the United States. This week we were joined by a guest, he's been here a few times, I think, before, Nick from Coin Bureau. How's it going, Nick?
Great, guys. Thanks for having me again, Ben.
Great to have you. And of course, Guy, also from Coin Bureau. How's it going, Guy?
Yeah, good to see you, Ben. Do we know why Rob is absent? Is he just chilling on the beach with his games?
Maybe. I don't know. He's probably playing volleyball or doing something. I have no idea.
Living his best life, I hope.
Yeah. So we have a lot to talk about today. I mean, a lot has happened in the markets in a relatively short period of time. So and even right now, the markets are struggling a little bit following the PPI, the inflation data. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But the first question I wanted to kind of throw your guys' way is got to be about Ethereum, right? It's got to be because Ethereum has, it's been acting differently for the last few months than it has for most of the rest of the cycle. It's rallying against Bitcoin. It's rallying against the US dollar. What do you guys think is primarily driving price action for Ethereum right now? Like, what do you think the primary factors are? Nick, we'll start with you.
So I think that right now, a lot of it is the treasury accumulation. The Ethereum treasury the corporations has put an Ethereum on their balance sheets, trying to run the Michael Saylor strategy through with Ethereum this time. The likes of Bitmine, SharpLink, ETHSeller, the Ether Machine, and the accumulation has been crazy in terms of how much they've added. So Tom Lee famously wants to accumulate 5% of all that supply. Ethereum, right? That's his target, and the capital markets have been, have facilitated this because they're valuing, at least in the case of Bitmine, the MNAV, so the multiple of net asset value, higher than the assets within the Ethereum assets, which means they can continue to go out there, use the capital markets to raise more money to buy ETH, and he's intent on doing that. And I think that this itself was one of the, so many people have said that, for example, Tom Lee has, quote, CTO'd, so basically community takeover Ethereum in altcoin parlance. So basically, yes, Tom Lee is doing that. And on top of that, this narrative has completely changed around Ethereum because Tom Lee's out there all the time talking about Ethereum constantly on CNBC and everything. And he's known in this space to be a cryptocurrency forecaster. So that's helped it as well. And there's many other factors, of course. ETF flows have picked up a lot. Like on Monday, we had the biggest ETF flows ever for Ethereum, over $1 billion. And then 2 days ago, we had the second most ever at 700 million. And that's just on terms of the capital flows into Ethereum. Narrative as well, about a month or two ago, the Genius Act passed. And that led to a lot like this regulatory tailwinds. Think about all of these stable coins that will now, and Genius, of course, relates to the stable coins and regulations around stable coins in the US, how much that's going to, given that most of the stable coins are issued on Ethereum, how much that's going to lead to demand for Ethereum as a network, right? So, I mean, there's many other factors we can talk to, and Guy can also mention some of these, like the demand has been soaring, holders have hit all-time records, and transaction demand is the same as the highest it's been since 2021. And then futures open interest, options open interest. So it seems as if there was just, and prior to this, of course, we know that Ethereum was the most hated asset in terms of like its price action was the worst anyone had ever seen. And generally, it seemed as if an asset is sold off so much, there's going to come a turning point at which it's the loaded spring. And that narrative shift is what's caused all of this. And then all of the other catalysts around it gave it the fuel it needed to rocket higher.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of seems like the perfect storm for it, honestly. People hated it. You got all the ETF flows. You got the treasury companies buying it up. Definitely an interesting narrative shift from where Ethereum was just, say, like, 5 or 7 months ago. It feels like it's completely trading differently than it was. Guy, do you kind of see the same thing? I mean, Nick basically covered it, but do you see basically the same thing as to what's really driving Ethereum?
Yeah, I do. I just wanted to sort of pick up on a couple of smaller points, sort of, underlining what Nick was talking about. I mean, first up, it's important, as you so often say, Ben. Price is driving narrative here, not vice versa. So I think we should be careful of sort of overstating, that necessarily that the idea that anything particularly big has changed with Ethereum, other than the fact that we've seen this rotation, or we're seeing this rotation from at least in attention as well as capital, from Bitcoin to Ethereum. And I think there are a couple of things just worth considering about that. First of all, I think if we go back to the last Ethereum upgrade, which was fairly recent, I think it was Pectra, but I mean, so many have happened. I'm sort of losing track of the names. But one of the interesting things that Pectra, or at least the latest upgrade, enabled was that it streamlined the whole business of staking ETH. And I think staking is a big part of why we're suddenly seeing this demand from treasury companies for ETH over Bitcoin. Now, you could argue that Bitcoin is still a very popular asset for treasury companies. There are plenty of strategy imitators out there. So, but Ethereum does have this added ingredient, if you like, that it can be staked and you can earn an extra income. And as I was saying, one of the things that the latest upgrade did was to streamline that staking process. It used to be that the maximum stake was 32 ETH. Which meant that if you had large amounts of ETH, then actually staking it was a bit fiddly, because you had to spin up one validator after another, and you could only do 32 ETH at a time. Now, if I remember correctly, I think it's 2,048 ETH is the maximum stake. So actually, the whole business of staking ETH has become a lot easier and a lot more streamlined. And I think that could be one of the things that has perhaps made it that little bit more attractive. Other than the fact that obviously staking gives you a yield, and these companies will be very interested in that, holding this asset that not only theoretically appreciates in value, but also can earn them 5% or around that figure, whatever it is. So I think that's really important. I think the only other thing I wanted to pick up on as well was this idea. Nick, I think, touched on it: regulations being favourable. I mean, we've had some really positive news. I think one of them, certainly for ETH and projects in Ethereum's ecosystem, the SEC coming out recently and saying that liquid staking tokens, the likes of Lido staked ETH and all these others, saying that they explicitly are not securities. Again, I think that's really big. I think that will have incentivized a lot of these treasury companies to look more carefully at staking. So yeah, obviously price is driving the narrative here, but Ethereum, there have been positive upgrades to the Ethereum network and also regulatory shifts as well, which I think have certainly contributed.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it seems like I do generally agree, right? Like, narrative does follow price, but it is interesting how it's so easy to look around and kind of see everyone sort of FOMOing into Ethereum together as the stars have essentially aligned for it over the last few months. But one question I had about this, and Guy, we'll just continue with you on this one and rotate back. Ethereum has done very well since April. It's up, from like $1,300, and it's already basically, I don't think it quite hit new all-time highs yet. But it's gotten pretty close. Like, it's gone to around 4,700. So it's up more than 3x in such a short period of time. And some altcoins have kind of kept up with it, but we know collectively alts are down more than 50% against Ethereum over the last, let's call it 4 to 5 months. So I guess the question is, at what point will the altcoin market kind of join in on the fun that Ethereum is having, right? Like, it seems like Ethereum has the spotlight. And, something I used to say back like last cycle was like, when the dog's away, the cat will play. So like when Bitcoin's kind of not doing anything, Ethereum will run. But then when the cat's away, Ethereum, the mice will play. So when does the cat go away to allow the mice to play?
when can all our mouse altcoins safely come out? Yeah, it's a good question. I think first and foremost, we need to see ETH break a new all-time high. It's interesting, actually, isn't it? Because Bitcoin, I think, broke a new all-time high last night, and it's sort of no one's really talking about that anymore. It just shows how much ETH has got the spotlight at the moment, as you say, Ben. But yes, I think so. The all-time high was around $4,900 or something like that. I think we need to break through that, and then probably break through 5K as well, and set a significant new all-time high. Because I think there will probably be, we've had a little bit of a market dip because of the PPI data that's come out, but I think that all-time high is within sight. I would imagine that we would get there, probably in the next few days. But of course, there'll be a lot of profit taking. There'll be a lot of selling around that level, I think. So I would imagine once we're past that and have sort of put some blue sky between the current all-time high and the next all-time high, if you like, that I think could be when we might start seeing a rotation. And I think the rotation will probably be, or almost certainly be, into projects in Ethereum's ecosystem. And we've kind of seen a sense of this already. Certainly over the weekend, some of the best performing projects, like Athena and Lido Finance, for example, are both Ethereum ecosystem projects. And I think that gives us a sense of where the capital will go next. So new ETH all-time high, break comfortably above it, get above 5K and, hopefully comfortably above 5K. And then I think Ethereum ecosystem projects will probably have a bit more time to shine. But of course, in order to get there, we need liquidity. So I think we're going to talk about the possibility of a rate cut a little later. But we do need liquidity, to flow into the market, and we also need retail to come back. Now, can you throw up the tweet that I've shared? This is something we tweeted. The searches for altcoins are definitely going in the right direction. And Ben, at some point, it would be great to see your social graph from your website, because I think that would give us, how YouTube channels like ours are getting on, because I think that's an important sentiment indicator. But yeah, I think those two things, we need a return of retail, which seems to be happening. We need increased liquidity, and we need a comfortable new ETH all-time high. All of which I think is very possible, and sooner rather than later, perhaps. And if we can bounce back from this current dip on the PPI figures.
Yeah, I can show it briefly. So these are YouTube views to a lot of these different crypto YouTube channels. You can see that they're still well below where they were in 2021, right? So we're still averaging around 1 million views per day. These channels, which includes your, Coin Bureau, includes my channel, includes like 20 others. So I mean, it's the retail is not here in the same way they were in 2021, right? You could even look at if you look at like the social risk, which incorporates that. Look at it. I mean, it's still way down here. And so it's one of those things where, like, it feels like it keeps seeming like, okay, retail is going to come back, and then they just keep not coming. Maybe Google Trends is maybe it leads more. Like maybe people start to search it on Google Trends first, and then after they get tired of that, then they go over to YouTube and see what we have to say. I don't know. But it really has, and you know what I've really noticed when the views go up, it's after Bitcoin surges above all-time highs, right? So like the views went up a lot starting in about mid-November 2024, and basically every single time that Bitcoin puts in new cycle highs, that's when we start to see the views surge. I bet you, and this actually would be in confluence with what you said, Guy. You know how you said, like, you think alts will probably join the party whenever Ethereum breaks new all-time highs and can hold it, not just like a wick above it and then back down, but like once it really clears 5K and moves, I bet a lot of retail will come back after Ethereum is clearing new all-time highs, because that will then have a bigger effect on the because Ethereum is kind of closer to the altcoin market than Bitcoin is, right? I mean, Ethereum technically is an altcoin. So I think absolutely. I think whenever Ethereum durably clears all-time highs, that's when you see the retail come back, and maybe we'll start to see that uptick in the views. I don't know, but I think you're right. I think that's probably how it's gonna play out. Nick, what are your thoughts? I mean, look, and I've seen the comments, by the way. I mean, some people are like, well, this altcoin is guys. I wasn't talking about your altcoin, right? Like I wasn't talking about yours.
Yeah, I mean, there have been, yeah,
I haven't been watching this show.
they got to know. You look at it, it's all altcoins together, right? The others versus ETH is still down a lot, right? So it is an ETH season, although collectively, and there are a few, as they mentioned, like Ethereum related ecosystem projects that have outperformed ETH at least the past month. You know, the likes of ENA, Lido, etc. But in collectively, yes, I mean, it has been an ETH season. In terms of whether we're going to see the classic rotation into alts down the risk curve, there's a few questions I have there. I think, firstly, obviously, yes, there is retail. We need retail for that, because I think that the kind of individuals who are going to want to speculate on altcoins down the risk curve are more likely to be retail, because as we've seen with what's been driving this Ethereum rally has been the accumulation via ETFs, which are a great wrapper for normal 401k people, normal retail, normie retail, to invest in Ethereum in a compliant wrapper, and then the accumulation by the treasury companies. Now, they obviously buying, the treasury companies are buying ETH, they're staking it. The ETF buyers are buying ETFs, they're holding it, so they may buy staked ETF if they want to at later stage. But in order to get into the altcoins, they're going to have to sell out of the ETFs. Okay, put aside the question around, in-kind redemptions. That's a smaller detail. They're going to have to sell out of the ETFs and then buy back into crypto natively on exchanges or through DEXs and everything. So the movement from rotation from these ETFs, from the treasury companies that usually happen for capital flow, it's not going to be as smooth. But for sure, if we start seeing ETH breaking through all-time highs, which I will struggle a little bit initially for the previous all-time high, because it could be a resistance level, but look at how long 4,000 was a resistance level until it finally broke through. So once it finally breaks through the all-time high, it may retrace a little bit, but then it's going to continue going higher because of this accumulation we just talked about. And that will then, headlines will flow, right? And then, as we know, price drives narrative, price drives excitement. It's like a positive feedback loop. Then older retail will start coming back. They'll start bidding the altcoins that they know because they were there in the previous cycle. The likes that are listed on a lot of different exchanges, likes of, most people say dino coins, but that's what they are, because they've been around for quite some time, the OG coins. And then they can start moving down the risk curve. But yeah, I do question how smooth that movement will be, because of the fact that we have these new instruments that people can speculate on Ethereum with. And we do need that retail to come in. And when will that retail come in? Yes, they'll come when there's narrative and they see the news of ETH breaking new all-time highs, but also come back to the point Guy made around liquidity and easier monetary conditions and the macro picture. So when we'll be talking about that soon, I hope, but it's like when we start seeing easier monetary conditions and interest rates coming down, this could bring retail back to the table.
Yeah. I mean, and we'll basically go into interest rates right now. But I like this guy's comment, aren't we retail? Yeah, technically we are.
Just need many more of us.
Yeah, we need many more of
retail. Please bid my bags.
Right now, there are just dozens of us, but we need thousands of us.
Yeah,
just a few dozen of us propping up the market on our own. It's gosh, it's lonely, isn't it?
So Nick was talking about this before the stream, but we got everyone's. I see the comments. Everyone's like, "What's going on?" Obviously the PPI data came in this morning. Inflation came in way above expected. If you look at where it came in, I think it came in at 3.7%, and it was estimated to come in at like 2.9, and then like last month was 2.6. So inflation data has absolutely decimated that little rally we had on Ethereum to hit new all-time highs. So it's probably not going to happen today. It seems like the markets is trying to digest this news. And so the first thing I'll say is someone's going to be fired at whoever released the data, probably. So I hope they don't. I hope they're not too attached to their job security. But Nick, I mean, I know you mentioned it earlier, and really, I want to talk about rate cuts as well, because and Guy, I think you guys are both talking about how one of the ways to get the juices flowing in the market again is to get that looser monetary policy, to have those interest rate cuts, and look, I mean, if you go to the Fed watch tool, the CME watch tool, we're basically locked in for a rate cut for the Fed. I mean, there's like a 95% chance they're going to cut rates on September 17th. But my question is this. I mean, so we know they're likely going to do it. I would like to know, do you think that had they had the jobs data from a couple of weeks ago, do you think, knowing that, do you think they've already should have been cutting? But then you look at the PPI data today and you're like, well, what are they, if they cut while inflation's going back up, that could also lead to some issues. So Nick, can you kind of walk us through your thoughts on what the Fed's likely going to do and the repercussions of what they might do?
Yeah, sure. I also am personally surprised that in a Trump-approved statistics world that someone would actually publish bad inflation data. They're going to see what happened to the BLS head. But yeah, it's interesting because obviously I think the Fed is trying and Powell has had a very tough time because they're trying to decide how the inflation picture will look when the tariff pass-through comes in, right? And they haven't been able to make it not only in terms of having data about how tariffs have impacted past inflation or in the past few months, but also just how do you forecast inflation when you don't even know what the tariff rates are, right? So we have still uncertainty. Yes, we have some trade deals done, but the China one has been pushed back. The one with India has gone up. The one with Europe has to be ratified by all European nations. So you've got this massive amount of uncertainty about what inflation could be. And I think what the Fed is really worried about, yes, there's the jobs component that came in, it was terrible. But I think what they're more worried about is if they ease too quickly and inflation does come back with a vengeance, it could be like the 70s, a case where you have a runaway. The second bout of inflation is way worse than the first because inflation expectations become completely untethered. And that's what I think he's worried about. And that's the way worse inflation. Then you have to go back even harder with higher interest rates. So I think that's what the Fed is really worried about. But there is indeed like a disagreement within the Fed itself. There's at least two governors or three, I think, in the most recent FOMC meeting that said that we need to start cutting rates. Scott Bessent thinks that in the next meeting, in September, it should be 50 basis points. But I think that as from what I'm reading, Powell is going to use the Jackson Hole symposium to basically tamp down the market expectations for a cut in September, even though there's like near certainty the market's pricing it in. So I think that in the case of Powell, he's really worried about that second leg of inflation that could pick up. And I think that, what Powell thinks really may not matter anymore, given that Trump is already planning his successor. And it seems now there's also this concept of a shadow Fed chair with the new Fed governor being replaced by Stephen Moran from the White House, another governor. So he could have a vote on the board already. So it's a very difficult circle to square here for Powell, and indeed all the rate setters there. Yeah,
I mean it's kind of crazy, and I agree. I think Powell's going to come out here and temper expectations relatively soon, just because I don't think he wants his legacy to be inflation surges back up and he doesn't do anything about it. So Guy, or what do you think? What do you think's how's this gonna play out with the Fed? Because I mean, they're gonna be under pressure to cut, and not just in September, right? They're gonna be under pressure to cut basically from here on out. But how do you aggressively cut with PPI coming in? Basically a full percentage point above where it was last month.
Yeah, and inflation even without that spike in the PPI, inflation was still above the 2% target. I mean, okay, it's come down a lot from where it has been, but it is still above the target. And I think the tariffs have kind of confused everything, have muddled the picture very much, because no one really knows what it's going to look like, what the economy is going to look like, what inflation is going to do once the dust finally settles. And as Nick points out, that dust hasn't settled because tariffs are still being negotiated and the can is still being kicked down the road. And okay, Europe has supposedly signed this deal that is absolutely awful for Europe, but as Nick says, that the individual members haven't ratified that, so there's still a heck of a lot that could happen. As to your earlier question of whether Powell should have cut rates already, I mean, the economy's held up and inflation has come down and has been kept under control, today's spike notwithstanding. So without being able to see what would have otherwise been, I think you have to kind of give Powell and the FOMC the benefit of the doubt in terms of what they've done so far. As we've said many times on this show, they've kind of landed the plane, and the US economy is holding up. So yeah, but it's such a difficult picture. I don't envy the job that they have to do. And I guess, I mean, the consensus was that, or certainly a lot of people believing that we might get a double cut, as in a 50 basis point cut in September. I suppose that those expectations give Powell, the FOMC, I should say, the option to maybe do a smaller cut, a 25 basis point cut, and try and keep everyone sort of happy or in line. But it's a really difficult job that they've got to do, and the whole tariffs thing has only made that more complicated. And who knows when we're finally going to get absolute clarity on that situation.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the problem that the Fed's going to have is, like, what if they cut into just rising inflation again?
Yeah.
I mean, the problem is that we could just see yields soar again, just like they did last year after they cut rates. And, maybe after the Fed cuts a couple more times and yields are higher, maybe at that point, investors will finally get the memo that, like, rate cuts aren't necessarily the solution to everything. Sometimes you need higher for longer to calm the animal spirits,
Cost push inflation. Yeah, exactly. In the 70s, that time it was oil. This time it's potentially tariffs. And it's also interesting around the long-term rates, because that's driven by inflation expectations. So if Trump thinks that you can just go and replace the Fed with a new governor who's going to acquiesce and drop rates to near zero, I mean, what do you think is going to happen to the long end of the curve, the 10-year, the 30-year? And that's where most mortgages and debt in the US economy is priced. And then you're going to have rising interest rates and rising mortgage costs. So that's not the optimal solution either way.
And people forget, don't they? People go, "Oh, rates are high. Isn't this awful?" It's like, inflation is way worse. A high rates environment is not ideal. I'll give you that. But a high inflation environment, everyone's screwed. So
yeah, it's like, pick your poison, right?
Yeah.
I mean, lower rates might seem appealing, but they're probably going to make mortgage rates go up, not down. So I think I think it's like a famous quote. I don't know who said it, but they said the only solution to high interest rates is more high interest rates, right? Like, that's the only way you can get to lower rates, is to just keep rates higher for longer, and then you can eventually go more safely to lower rates. But if you go to lower rates too soon, I mean, look at what they did in the 90s. That was what led into the .com mania. They cut rates, and when they cut rates, kind of like they're doing right now, it ignited the animal spirits so much to the point where they ended up having to raise rates again. And then after they raised rates, then they finally, they killed off the animal spirits, and then the market. Then we had the massive crash in the early 2000s. So yeah, that's what Powell is trying to avoid, right? He does not want to have to raise rates again, because that would, I mean, can you imagine if they ended up having to do that? Like, if Trump gets this new guy to come in, replace Powell, and he promises to lower rates, and then he ends up being forced to raise rates. If I mean, that would just be like a crazy moment. But it's certainly not impossible for it to happen at some point over the next 4 years, right? Like, it certainly seems like a possibility. So let's go to the next question. And the next question I generally have is just, look, you guys have been in the crypto markets a long time. You've been running Coin Bureau a long time. But the first thing I'll ask is, we've had 4-year cycles, right? I mean, every single cycle seems to top at around the same time. Every single cycle seems to bottom at around the same time, right? We get our peak in the post-halving year, kind of near the end of the year. We get our bottom kind of near the end of the midterm year. Are we destined to repeat ourselves, right? Do you believe in the 4-year cycle? Anytime I talk about it, I'm generally met with, well, this time is different because we have, treasury companies, and we have, ETFs, and we have all these things we haven't had in prior cycles. So I'm curious, like, do you think the 4-year cycle is going to hold up, and Bitcoin will put in a market cycle top, kind of like later this year, or do you think that we're going to be in uncharted territory? Nick, what do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess the question is, firstly, what drives the 4-year cycle? Because that itself hasn't been settled. Some people say, hey, it's the halving, this concept of you have a reduction in inflation and therefore you have the supply crunch and Bitcoin rallies on that. But is it actually the cut in inflation, or is it people rallying, buying Bitcoin in expectation of that? So self-fulfilling prophecy in terms of price. Then some people say, in fact, it may have nothing to do with the halving. It could just be liquidity flows, general macro liquidity flows come in and out of the markets, and that's what drives the 4-year cycle. But so we have had a 4-year cycle, that's a fact. In terms of going forward, well, if you ascribe to the thesis that it's the inflation cut itself and Bitcoin leads to an increase in price, it's negligible, right? So the halving itself should have negligible impact on the emission rates because the change is minimal, and eventually it's going to go away because it's going to go to a terminal limit of Bitcoin issuance. But in terms of market expectations, and right now coming in and out of it, it is true that market dynamics have changed to the extent that obviously you've got these ETFs and the digital asset companies, as you mentioned, that are the digital treasury companies that are buying these digital assets. So that is obviously leading to the fact that it's not as sensitive to the liquidity flows, and because they obviously been held by entities like Strategy, for instance, who will never sell his Bitcoin, right? So it's not going to go back into the market when the things turn around, when liquidity turns around. But I think that many people then think that, oh, well, if there is no 4-year cycle, does this mean we're going into a super cycle? I don't think that either. I think there's going to come a point at which the market's going to retrace. Nothing ever goes up forever. There will be some profit taken. And indeed, some of these digital asset treasury companies themselves, many people think that these could potentially be what causes the next crash. How big that crash is, we don't know, but that could be it. An unwinding of the MNAVs, etc. But in terms of, I think we still will have a peak in terms of Bitcoin, a cycle top towards the end of the year or next. But I think that the retracement won't be as large, and it may indeed, in terms of how long we remain in there, it may not be another 4 years, right? It may be shorter. But I don't think that it's following the regular processes we have. I mean, I don't think it's going to be exactly as it was in the past. It's going to basically be a more extended cycle that's driven by these other factors.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen diminishing losses every cycle as well. Whenever the bear market does kick in, if it does kick in the midterm year, it seems like every cycle is a little bit more manageable than the last one in terms of the drawdown. So it's kind of like the opposite of diminishing returns, right? No one likes diminishing returns, but one artifact potentially of diminishing returns is diminishing losses, which make the bear markets a little bit more manageable. Guy, what are your thoughts on the 4-year cycle? I mean, are you kind of in the camp, hey, if it's not broke, don't try and fix it? Or what do you think?
Yeah, I'm just, it's just those words, isn't it? This time is different. It just sets you up for such a fall, for so much disappointment. But I mean, to expand on what you and Nick have said, there is so much that is different about this time. And I think back to 2021 and I think back to 2017, both periods when, this market, this whole crypto thing was so much more esoteric, was so much more mysterious. It was just this shiny new thing that really, very few people had any sort of a clue about. And no one in the traditional financial system wanted to touch it with a 10-foot pole. And then what was it last week? Trump, the US president, signs an executive order saying that 401ks can invest can invest in crypto, along with other, along with things like private equity as well, admittedly. But there just seems to have been so much integration with the wider system, and that's before you get on to things like spot ETFs and treasury companies, and all these other ways in which crypto has become a part of the wider system. The growth of stablecoins, et cetera, et cetera. So. I do believe in. I do think the 4-year cycle is probably intact, but it's going to become less and less pronounced. And I think this will, as you said, Ben, diminishing returns, but also the downside should theoretically be less as well. So I think we probably, my guess, what I'm planning for is that the cycle will roll over again, but unless something really catastrophic happens, which, let's face it, this being crypto, it could well happen. Something there are plenty of things that could go wrong, but just assuming for that it doesn't, I think that the cycle will roll over, but it won't be nearly as pronounced. Black swans aside. But yeah, I mean, I think as it goes on, I imagine it as sort of ever decreasing circles in a way, because I just don't see how, as crypto becomes bigger and more integrated, I don't see how that 4-year dynamic can hold up, unless of course it's driven by, it's just following the kind of regular business cycle. And it's this idea of a sort of crypto specific 4-year cycle is just a nice little pattern that we've all kind of latched onto, but doesn't actually really mean anything, because it's been driven by things, as Nick sort of hinted at, it's been driven by things way beyond our tiny little industry.
Well, and the other thing too is that you could even argue that 4-year cycles existed well before crypto, actually. Like if you look here, if you look at the S&P 500, right? Like these major lows in the S&P, right? This is 1966, 1970, 1974, 1978, right? All these major lows are basically 4 years apart, right? Guess what this one is? 1982, right? So you could almost, like, this to me, like this is almost proof that this 4-year cycle has existed well before crypto has, because you can see a lot of the major lows in the markets tend to be about 4 years apart. I mean, even this low over here is 1962, right? So you have 62, 66, 70, 74, 78, 82. So I do think that, we've sort of latched on to it being based around the halving, but you look at a chart like that and you're like, well, I mean, it's kind of always been a thing, and I wonder if it has something to do with, the presidential cycle, right? It might have to do with, the presidential cycle and, when
standard business cycle, I think.
Yeah, it could have to do with the standard business cycle as well. Though you could argue that even, you could argue that crypto, I mean, if you ignore the pandemic, you could almost argue that crypto hasn't even seen a full business cycle in all of its existence, considering that the unemployment rate went down for most of the time that Bitcoin has been around, right? It's been, the unemployment rate has been going down, except for recently and except for the COVID spike. But I have one last question for you guys, and before we get to it, if you're in the chat, and wow, we got over 4,000 people watching. So if you're in the chat and you have a question for either Nick or Guy, go ahead and put it down there. So I will pick a few and I'll ask it to them here in a few minutes. But I'd like to ask you guys, you guys have been building and building Coin Bureau for a while. I've been watching you guys' channel for I don't know how long. And I'm kind of curious, like, what do you guys have what do you guys have planned for the next 5 to 10 years? In 10 years, if someone mentions Coin Bureau, like, what do you want Coin Bureau to be? I guess, like, what do you want it to grow into? And either of you could take it.
10 years, Ben. Wow. 10 years in crypto, man. Like a crypto year is like a dog year, bro. I'm telling you.
So I
personally would like, whether I'll still be around and alive in 10 years, the stress this place gives you. Yeah, I mean, I can start. I mean, I think like, shorter term, I think the goal is like, it has always been around crypto education. and as many ways that we can expand that education to more people through different mediums and different social platforms and in different languages. So we've got like now more than one language channel. We've got Spanish, we've got Mandarin. We expanded out with a trading channel for trading content, and we're looking to do more of that in different regions as well and different platforms. We're working on improving like a lot of the products we build in. So one of the most exciting things we're working on that Guy can also speak to is like the Coin Bureau Club, which is our subscription model, our subscription service. We're going to be completely upgrading that with so many more features. And the goal will be to make that the center for all the other content that it's not being posted on the YouTube. And also to be able to build out potentially looking at additional courses, so like educational courses that people can sign up and get some and just get informed and taught about cryptocurrency from the basics to the more advanced stuff that's outside of just the YouTube wrapper. Because I think that most YouTubers really in the crypto space, like YouTube is a central risk, right? In the extent that if your platform is YouTube, you need to find other ways to get the message out as well. And when you control your own platform, that's a major value unlock. And then building out, expanding and potentially hosts as well, and expanding out types of content formats, interviews at events, managing events. And just expand out globally, and hopefully within 10 years, just have the same Coin Bureau vision and mission, but reaching way more people in many different countries and different languages.
Yeah, and by the way, guys, if you guys aren't subscribed to Coin Bureau, make sure you do so. Links in the description below. And then also you should check out their Coin Bureau Club. I don't have a link offhand, but
we'll share it down below.
Yeah, you can share it down below. And you guys can go check that out. They provide a lot of great analysis and tools over there that I think are pretty helpful in terms of navigating the Cryptoverse. Guy, did you have anything to add to what Nick said?
Not a lot. No, I mean, he laid it out pretty well. I mean, I guess 10 years just feels like I'm still doing this in 10 years. I don't know what sort of state I'm going to be in mentally and physically. Crypto being what it is.
Brian Johnson, we can get some advice from Brian Johnson, Guy. We can basically keep Guy looking like he is right now.
We're all going to be here still asking when's retail going to come back.
So it's been 15 years. I mean, surely they must be ready to come back by now. I mean, I think a sort of oxygen chamber, cryotherapy chamber might be in the office, might be the sort of first thing we should be looking at. But expanding the reach of the platform that we have, and I like the idea that with all the other channels that we have, and all the other faces that we've got presenting, and researchers and writers supporting them and stuff. I love the idea that we might be able to sort of be broadcasting almost kind of 24 hours, on across our channels, in a few years' time. I love that idea that you can just tune in and somewhere there'll be some Coin Bureau content for you to watch. Obviously, made to the high standard that people expect. I had a really interesting conversation with someone here in Dubai a few weeks ago, someone who works in traditional finance, and he didn't know originally that I worked in crypto, and so we started talking about it, and he said, "Oh, what do you do?" And I said, "Well, a YouTuber, but we have an education platform." And he said, "Oh, so many people I work with, as in TradFi." He said, so many people are sort of crypto curious, but really they don't know anything about it. They don't know anything. And I really feel that like maybe that is somewhere that we should be trying to bridge to and stuff, because we've got this amazing audience, and as of you, Ben, and Rob as well, we've got this amazing audience of people on YouTube who are learning off their own bat and interested in the space and stay engaged. But now that crypto and TradFi are becoming so intertwined, I kind of feel that it's like, well, TradFi needs to understand what it is they're dealing with here, because it's amazing stuff. But if you don't really know what you're doing, and I really like the idea of kind of trying to bridge that gap a little bit, as Nick said, with courses and what have you, but sort of try and expand our brand into that area, because I think it's important that people, especially people with their hands on the money, so to speak, should understand what this thing is, because I think that will benefit everyone. It will benefit them, and it will benefit the space, because I think we're only at the beginning of TradFi's integration with crypto. So I hope that we can do that as well. But I was going to ask you, Ben, what about you? What about into the Cryptoverse? Do you have a 5-year, 10-year roadmap, as it were?
Nope.
No. No. Swinging it.
Just day to day, just stay alive.
Loving every day of it, just doing it for the funds, for the laughs.
I mean, we've made some additional, recently we've been adding some more international macro data to the website and stuff. Trying to make it a little bit more inclusive. I mean, even today when I asked you guys about rate cuts, neither of you even live in the United States, but because I'm an ignorant American, you knew what I was talking about when I said, they're going to cut rates. Is it the Fed, right? I have to remind myself, it's probably important to follow other central banks as well, but there's also some element of the Fed is, a big player in the overall global markets. Actually, there's a few things that actually has happened. So one thing that's happened since we've been on live is that Treasury Secretary Scott has said that the U.S. will not be buying any Bitcoin. And so now you have a lot of people saying, wait, we were promised a strategic Bitcoin reserve, and what do you mean you're not buying any? And so that's kind of also, it's almost like there was a double whammy then today, right? Not only do you have the Treasury Secretary saying that, but you also have PPI. What do you got, Nick?
To be fair, I think to Besant and co, I mean, I think that if I recall, the executive order for the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve said they would hold all the Bitcoin that they've seized. And if there were budget neutral ways to accumulate more Bitcoin, they'd also hold all altcoins that are seized as well, that are subsequently seized as well. But it seems they haven't found a budget neutral way to accumulate Bitcoin, because maybe they've expended all their budget on, paying interest on the debt, because they just raised the debt ceiling by however many trillion.
Yeah.
I think they were always, ever since this, I always get the impression that when Trump started talking about a strategic Bitcoin reserve, everyone in his team sort of went, really? Okay. And ever since then, I've got the impression that it's sort of been like, yeah, we never said we would buy it. We never said we would buy it. There was this budget neutral way to accumulate, and there was, I've always had my kind of suspicions about what that actually meant. And of course, they did give themselves that out, where it was like, well, we're just not going to sell. We're not going to sell. We didn't say we'd buy. And of course, saying that you would buy, it makes for suboptimal buying conditions, because then you pump the market and you'd have to buy at a higher price. So I don't think what Besant said is too consequential, because I think they've kind of been dancing around this a little bit anyway. So yeah, I think it's just a case of, as it coming at the same time as the PPI data, it's probably had an outsized impact. But I've always been kind of slightly skeptical of this idea that the US is just going to start hoovering up Bitcoin in the same way that these ETF issuers have and the Michael Saylors of this world have. It doesn't seem to, it never quite rung true for me.
Was it even possible to do without any sort of legislative effort, though? Because, I mean, I don't know what the extent of presidential power with regard to executive orders just being used in state, treasury funds to accumulate Bitcoin. So I didn't even know if it was possible. I know that Cynthia Lummis had an idea, the Bitcoin Act, but that didn't go on much traction yet. So, yeah. There
was that great article. I think it was in CoinDesk that Nick Carter wrote, and I must try and find it again. It was either in CoinDesk or
CoinDesk,
yeah, I think it was, where he outlined all the reasons. And bear in mind, Nick Carter is a big Bitcoin bull. He outlined all the reasons why it wasn't possible to, and a big part of it was like, getting congressional approval to spend, to spend money on accumulating Bitcoin, that is not going to be easy.
Yeah.
Whether that would even be possible. So I just don't think it. I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters. I think what's important is that the administration is pro crypto. The SEC has gone literally 180 from being from wanting to destroy the industry to like actively encouraging it. The contrast between what Paul Atkins is saying now and what Gary Gensler was saying a year ago is night and day. And I think that's what's important. And it's little things like, being able to invest in 401ks, the CFTC having more oversight, liquid staking tokens not being securities. All of these things, not much on their own, but added up, it's huge. That's what's important. I think this idea of a strategic reserve has always been a bit of a, a bit of a canard or whatever you'd say. Like it doesn't matter. It's not important.
Right. But there's also been a ton of hype about a strategic Bitcoin reserve for a while now. And definitely there was speculation. I mean, I'm not saying that they necessarily said so, but definitely there's been speculation in the crypto space that they would start buying Bitcoin, because if all they're going to do is kind of hold what they had, that's not nearly as exciting for a lot of people as if the government was actually buying it. To be clear, I don't think it's a good idea for the government to go out and actively start. I would prefer the government just stay out of it, if I'm being completely honest. Because because I don't really want Bitcoin to become a political thing. Bitcoin has gone up no matter who has been in office since Bitcoin has been around. And if they were to start accumulating Bitcoin and then let's say they lose the next election, does that mean that the people that come in, are they going to then just offload all of it? I would almost prefer it to just kind of stay out of the political eye, to be completely honest. But we have some questions, and I'd like us to get to them. Someone says, what's the next logical step after treasury companies? Either of you guys have an answer for that one?
Central bank accumulation. There's no better standard. The Bitcoin standard. Forget the dollar. Dollar is not a safe asset to hold in your central bank reserves. Neither gold. You want Bitcoin.
Is that something you expect this cycle, or something we can save for next cycle?
I mean, they've been talking about it. I think there was been talk about the Czech central bank recently. They've
talked about it a lot. Yeah,
they've floated the idea, and indeed, the more that the dollar gets weaponized, and countries seen as strategic adversaries to the US, they're not going to want to hold US dollars or US debt. And what's logical alternative? Gold, and then digital gold.
Yeah. I guess maybe as well. One of the things that was interesting from fairly recently was you had this sort of Meta shareholders, didn't you? And I think a couple of other sort of large tech companies basically go, absolutely no way do we want Bitcoin in the treasury. The vote was sort of overwhelming. So I do wonder whether maybe, again, this is probably something for next cycle, if there is a, if we're still in the cycles, but perhaps the next logical step could be sort of larger companies, not necessarily accumulating crypto treasuries per se, in the same way that these companies are doing now, but just diversifying their holdings and being comfortable about saying that, like the likes of Meta, say, or Amazon or Alphabet or whatever, coming out and saying, look, we've allocated 1% of our cash to Bitcoin. Don't get excited. We're not going to, we're not going to incorporate Bitcoin onto our platforms or anything like that. We're just diversifying our holdings in the same way that we hold gold and other commodities or whatever. Like that would seem to me to be logical. But of course, what part does logic ever play in these things?
Yeah. A couple of rapid fire questions. What was the reason for the dip that just happened?
PPR, right? Yeah. PPR came in hotter than expected.
10 years from now, will Ethereum flip Bitcoin?
It's back.
It's back. The flipping in threads, bro.
Think about this. Back when Ethereum was dropping against Bitcoin, when it was at this same level, 0.03 to 0.04, everyone was so bearish, right? Now that it's rallying back up to this, we're now talking about the flipping again.
I mean, it's crazy, man. It's absolutely. I'm sometimes at crypto, even being in crypto for so long, sometimes how quickly sentiment changes is just mind blowing. Even being in this for many cycles, the fact that 3 months ago people were writing obituaries for Ethereum and saying literally like Ethereum will never be above $2,000 again. It's the end. And now literally the flipping in meme is coming. I mean, it's magical, man. This space.
I don't think it'll happen. I don't think Ethereum's going to flip Bitcoin at any point, but that's just my view. Again, it's been putting in lower highs since 2017. It's higher lows, but also lower highs. And yeah, I don't see it happening. Guy, I don't know if you had anything to add.
No, the only thing that I think is worth watching. I'm with you guys. I don't think ETH will flip Bitcoin. The interesting thing that a few people have raised is Bitcoin's security budget. In 10 years' time, that will be another 2 halvings. So unless BTC's price continues going up and to the right indefinitely, which, let's face it, nothing does forever, then obviously there is the question of Bitcoin's security budget, because if miners aren't being rewarded much with block rewards, then their only other way of compensation at the moment is transaction fees. And at the moment, Bitcoin is sort of trending towards an asset that is bought and held. Look at Michael Saylor, look at these treasury companies and stuff. So that is an interesting question. I don't necessarily think that would lead to the flippening. I think that and quantum resistance, I think, are probably the things that are of the most concern for Bitcoin at the moment. And it will be interesting to see how those two things are addressed over the next 10 years, because still, I don't think a flippening is on the cards.
Nick mentioned Google Trends, or sorry, that's the wrong one. Where'd it go? I clicked off the question. Sorry, the question was, do you think that Google Trends data is being suppressed now with all the AI tools that people are using?
Yes, I think it is largely. Especially if they're just using ChatGPT or one of the other AI you remove from Google. Although I will say that Google's AI summaries that you have when you search are also pretty good, so people may still be gravitating towards that. But yeah, for sure. And then I think another thing just to point out, guys, is like, I don't know, in the younger crowd, the Gen Zs and stuff, I don't know how many of them actually go to Google anymore to search altcoins versus flip open TikTok or Instagram or whatnot and see what their favorite influencer is shilling, what they're saying about the XRP reserve and all that.
It's probably us lame millennials and boomers who use Google, isn't it? Yeah. All the based Gen Zs and Gen Alphas. Yeah, they
right. Google, what's that, bro? What's that?
What are the TikTok search trends? That's what I want to know.
Yeah. But it's just like, how many people are not even watching YouTube because they're just watching their favorite influencers on TikTok or Instagram or
exactly.
Other places.
Things change, generations change. I was listening to something today that said Gen Z and particularly Gen Alpha, culture-wise, are way more oriented towards Japan, South Korea, and China. Anime is becoming really sort of popular. So that the younger generations, the youngsters, are sort of moving away from what we're familiar with. So maybe it's the same with crypto. Who knows?
When ITC TikTok account, Ben?
We have one.
Oh, you do?
I couldn't tell you how to log into it. We have one. I think we have someone that posts some stuff there, but I don't even know how to access it.
I'll check it out, man. That's cool. I'll get some alpha there.
And that's where all my real subscribers are, right? Over on TikTok.
Yeah,
they're watching the 30-second clips, not the 45-minute videos.
Is that where you're putting your dancing videos, Ben?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I knew they were out there somewhere.
Someone wants to know. I mean, guys, no one knows. No one can exactly predict where price is going to go. But they said, could the effects of CPI and PPI cause ETH to go back to 4K? Look, there's a good chance that Ethereum will retest 4K at some point. I mean, if it that's my guess. It's had such an explosive move up. I'm going to guess it'll happen. I don't know if it's going to happen before September, but I would guess it'll probably happen.
Yeah.
And then Last question. How do you guys think the crypto industry will integrate in the everyday life in the future, short-term or long-term? You pick. Do you see a future where it really becomes the new normal? Guy, this kind of goes maybe to you, because you said, like with the next generation, could crypto become the new normal, or is it something they're not going to care about?
Well, it's something that they're going to use, but they're not going to know about it, I think. I think we talked, I think it was, we didn't do the show last week, did we? But maybe the week before I asked a question about sort of consumer crypto apps and whether you guys were aware of them or using them or anything like that. And, things like the Coinbase app, Coinbase Wallet has now rebranded to the Base app. And from what I've seen so far, there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. And I've said for a while now that I think before too long, people are going to be transacting with crypto, but they're not going to know or care. It's just going to be about, a number shows up on, they type some numbers into their phone and those numbers show up on their friend's phone a few seconds later. Bish bosh, everyone's happy. They don't care how it got there. They don't care whether it's USDC, USDT, Bitcoin, ETH, ADA. They don't care. It's just there, or even, or dollars or pounds or euros or whatever. So I think it will be, I think it will be sort of running under the surface, which makes it so crazy that we have these mouth frothing at the mouth communities around some of these cryptos. I think it was Gort who said, we put up a tweet from him a few weeks ago on the news. It's like people are going to look back and just how insane this whole thing was, that we built these cults around what is basically back office software. And I really, that really resonated with me. I think it's so true. Like, there is cool stuff happening, but I think that it will just integrate. And I don't think everyone will be like, oh no, I use crypto now. It'll be just another part of how people interact with each other online.
It is interesting how long the meme coin stuff has lasted. I feel like it just takes a long time to change public opinion about certain things, I think we're going to look back at this in 20 years and be like, how did we care about some of these coins?
Not if you believe the meme coin super cycle, Ben.
People have been talking about that forever, and I just keep looking at the others Bitcoin chart, and I'm like, it's bled for almost the entire time they've been calling for this meme coin super cycle. But guys, we're going to wrap it up. We're at the top of the hour, and just in the interest of time, we'll wrap it up. So next week, we should be on Rob's channel. Hopefully he can be here for that. But again, if you guys are not subscribed to Coin Bureau, make sure you do so. Link to that is in the description below. I'll also try to provide a link to Coin Bureau Club if you guys want to check that out in the description below as well. But we will see you guys next week on Rob's channel. So see you guys then.
Yes, guys. Great chat.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Cheers, man.